Hey everybody, Crypto STRANG here. Very honoured to have Ben from NERVOS Network CKB. Mentioned his project many times. Obviously spoke about many times on my Facebook group, also here on YouTube. So I say very honoured. So welcome, Ben. Thanks very much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
That's good. So just wondering if you give us a quick overview how NERVOS Network are getting on, progressing, because I know you go on your website and your roadmap, very sort of progressive, isn't it, and all your plans and your future plans. So if it's okay, just give us an overview on your plans for the rest of the year and how you're progressing.
Yeah, sure. You know, there's quite a lot, I guess, different areas that we could go into there. But probably as most people know, we launched the mainnet at the end of last year, and since then, lots of things have been happening. There's a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes as well. So I think we're going to see kind of a lot of that stuff come to a conclusion over the next kind of 3 to 6 months as well. So you know, one of the first things we launched early on after mainnet was the grants program. So to date, we've awarded about $1.5 million of grants, and we're starting to see a few of those projects have already completed, but there's many that are developing and moving on quite well. And I think we're going to see the completion of that stuff happen, you know, over the next 3 to 6 months. So there's a lot of exciting stuff there. I could go into a few of the projects like the Zero Knowledge Proof project, the CKB PW project, which allows sending CKB to any blockchain address, for example. But there's a lot of other maybe less exciting kind of projects happening there, but very fundamental projects focusing on kind of developer tooling and educational stuff as well. So things like CKB Studio, the online IDE, all of this stuff is coming together to essentially allow very easy onboarding and accessibility to developers in the space to come in and build on NERVOS, and really moving us towards that end goal, obviously, of having these end user applications as well. So that's the kind of grant side. On top of that, just a month or so ago, we launched the incubator program. So in many ways, that's kind of similar to the grants program, but it's very focused on essentially these end user products. So I think we're going to see that develop as well. I think we've got a couple of announcements coming out very shortly about some new projects that have just come into the incubator program. And that's really the evolution, the next steps, right, as we move further and further down from this very kind of infrastructure focus, which was the first half of this year, as we move to more these kind of user-facing applications towards the end of this year. So I think that's kind of the main narrative and theme that's happened throughout.
Since your launch last year, mate, with your mainnet, you've got so much development, and say you've just made so much progression. That's why I think you're sort of on everyone's radar, and everyone's sort of talking about you. I see you a lot over Twitter now and all various places. Everyone seems to be talking about NERVOS Network, so you're still making huge strides, that's for sure. So
well, we hope so. We hope so. I think one of the important things with NERVOS, you know, is we launched the mainnet, and I guess for a lot of projects in the space, the mainnet is kind of like the one thing, that's their product. With NERVOS, anyone who's relatively familiar with NERVOS will understand that the whole concept of NERVOS is about this multi-layered kind of ecosystem and platform. And the NERVOS CKB, the mainnet that we launched at the end of last year, is just the first part of that, right? That is that layer one, highly secure, permissionless, decentralized network, which allow all of the layer two scaling and everything to be built on top of it to be developed. So really that's the kind of point we're into now. And really the layer one is maybe only 20% of what we actually want to do here, right? And the rest, that 80%, is all of that scaling, the layer two stuff on top of it, which obviously takes a bit of time. I mentioned a bit about the grant stuff, and that's really laying the foundation to allow all of that stuff to come over the next, 6 to 12 months.
Wow, I say you're certainly keeping progressing well. As you know, we've got quite a few questions from the team on my Facebook group, Instagram, and also on YouTube as well. So I appreciate there's quite a few questions here, so you don't have to answer them. You know, some of these might be sort of, you can't because you're not allowed because it's got NDAs or whatever. But if you don't mind, I'll ask you a few questions. So one of the first questions everyone always talk about is exchanges. And someone put here that you're on Bittrex, Huobi, Hotbit, Probit. Do you have any plans to get on like Binance, Coinbase also was mentioned by Coinbase last year, pretty much on launch when that Coinbase was looking at your project. Are you allowed to talk about Coinbase? I fully understand if you're not. But is there any plans for any other exchanges to come out soon?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing to say is that 100% we definitely want to be listed on more exchanges, right? I think liquidity and accessibility is a very important part of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
So we're always, pushing for better listings, for high quality exchanges to list on, and that's always going on behind the scenes. It's quite a complicated process, and there's a lot of negotiation. There's timing is important. There's requirements, as a fairly young early project, there are requirements that we need to reach and things like that. So yeah, I mean, I can't really go into very specific details on stuff which obviously hasn't been made public yet. But we have dedicated resources within the foundation specifically focused on exchange listings, and we hope over the next 6 to 12 months to be listed on all the top exchanges around the world.
Wow, that would be good. Appreciate it's very difficult to get on Coinbase. I imagine it's many layers you have to jump through to get on there.
Yeah, it's a challenge. And there's another part which is maybe less relevant for most people, but there's also the kind of institutional custody side of things, which is another thing we're working on a lot. The institutional custody side of things tends to link in with the actual exchange listing stuff as well, so they kind of go hand in hand. So that's another area that we're very much pushing forward on as well.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah, that's lovely. Cheers. Someone also asked, you have many parts to your project development. Will you be issuing an updated roadmap soon for 2021? I appreciate you still got a lot going on the rest of this year, but will you be issuing an updated roadmap soon? Sounds like you've got a lot.
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, the roadmap that you're referencing that's on the website, right? It's quite broad, and that was released very early on. I think just maybe after mainnet launch, and that kind of set out our vision, right, for the year, for 2020. And we're very much kind of on track to achieve, I think, pretty much everything on that roadmap. And actually, the scope has expanded a bit. So we actually had our internal town hall last month, and Jan, who's the chief architect of Nervos, he talked a lot about this kind of stuff, plans going forward, and we're going to be releasing a lot of that information soon. So to answer your question, yes, is the answer. We'll be releasing a lot of information about the plans for the rest of the year and also going forward. And I think probably the roadmap will be updated along with a few other things in the pipeline, like a new website, etc.
Okay, I'll put a link below anyway for the roadmap so people can see it. But I say it's a very extensive roadmap, so that's good. Someone else, could you discuss the Neuron Wallet? A lot of people mention actually on YouTube for some reason. What is the Neuron Wallet? How does it work? Is it got another upgrade coming?
Yeah, so the Neuron Wallet is the what we call the kind of reference wallet, right? For Nervos. So the Neuron Wallet is built by an in-house team in the Nervos development team, and it's essentially what we call, as I said, the reference wallet. It's a little bit like the Bitcoin Core wallet, right? So any developer can come in, look at the Neuron Wallet, look at the code. Of course, it's all open source. And they can use that as a reference to build their own wallets if they want. Of course, the wallet can also be used by end users, and it's available for anyone who wants to download it. So currently, the Neuron Wallet is one of the most highly functionable wallets. So you have Nervos DAO operations and deposits within there, and the wallet is very, very nice, right? If you're a desktop user, it's got a great user interface. And yeah, so it's there for anyone to use. So basically, that is simply it. It's the wallet developed by the Nervos team.
Oh, great. Someone said, could you also discuss staking rewards? Is that something what's the staking reward sort of returns you get? For how much was the minimum amount you have to stake? Yeah, so it's a good question. On Nervos, there isn't actually staking, right? So staking as a kind of concept comes from proof of stake networks, right? Where essentially you stake your tokens to prove your authority or the amount of tokens you have, and therefore that allows you to create and publish blocks, right? So on Nervos, we're a proof of work network, so we don't have any concept of staking. However, what people are probably referencing to, which in some ways is very similar, is the Nervos DAO deposits, right? So if you do hold tokens and you're
basically planning to hold them for the long term, what you can do is you can deposit your tokens in the NERVOS DAO. And the NERVOS DAO is effectively an inflation shelter for the token issuance. So you can deposit your tokens in the NERVOS DAO, and you will receive an equal percentage of the secondary issuance as compensation for being in the NERVOS DAO. And I think that's sitting at around 3.5% or something like that. But essentially, the NERVOS DAO allows you to store your tokens and not be diluted at all by the secondary issuance of the token issuance on the network. I think there might be some further questions, and we can explore that a little bit more. But in many ways, it's similar to staking, right? On these proof of stake networks, I think definitely the first half of the year was very exciting, and people were looking for kind of high yields of staking rewards, right? Ultimately, those tokens, right, are basically just being paid through the token issuance. These new tokens are being created, and then they're being distributed. So you are essentially being diluted, just like you would be on any other network. So the NERVOS DAO and staking is very kind of comparable, but we don't refer to it as staking.
Okay, that's fair enough. Yeah. Someone asked this again. You don't have to answer. I think some of these questions are really in depth. Says, how does CKB make themselves sustainable? For instance, NRG, they release, I think it's 1 million tokens a month, and a huge percentage goes to the treasury. That keeps them sort of, progressing and allows them to invest in part of the project. So does CKB do a similar thing? Do you release so much for the treasury? How are you sustainable to keep progressing?
That's a great question. Some of this kind of ties in with the NERVOS DAO, and also I think maybe a couple of other questions around burning and this type of thing. So the token issuance model of NERVOS is the most important thing here. And essentially, there's tokens that are issued, right, on a regular basis onto the network, and those tokens are either paid to the miners, they're either paid to the token holders who have deposited into the NERVOS DAO, or those tokens can be paid into the community fund. Okay. Now, currently, those tokens that would be going into the community fund are being burnt. Okay. But there is a mechanism there to fund essentially the project and the foundation through the allocation of these tokens into the community fund. Now, the way that will work going forward is that when a decision is made to start putting those tokens into the community fund, the community can decide to do a hard fork of the network and implement that change. And what would happen from there is you would essentially have some kind of DAO, which would have voting rights, which would allow the allocation of those tokens. So I guess the simple answer is yes, there is a mechanism for that sustainable mechanism to keep the funding going for the project, and it would be implemented in a totally decentralized, community-driven DAO style approach.
That's good. That's good. That's good to hear. Yeah, it's wonderful. Again, someone said, do you have active marketing team? People talk about RHK. They've just signed up with PwC, haven't they? And do you have a huge marketing team behind you, or was that sort of just yourselves? You've got your own marketing team, or do you use an external company to sort of market it, CKB, to get the project out there, so everyone can see it?
Yeah. So we do have several marketing people. We've actually just brought in a new head of marketing who's just onboarded the last few weeks. So I think we'll be ramping up with the work that he'll be doing, and we'll see a lot of new stuff coming out. With the specific point you make is actually more related to what we refer to as business development, right? So partnerships and these types of things fall basically under that business development kind of team rather than the marketing team. And there is a lot of work there. There's a lot of stuff going on. We actually just recently announced a kind of collaboration and partnership with the Grin team to implement Mimblewimble onto NERVOS. So that's a super exciting announcement we just made. And of course, one of the biggest news of the last few weeks, or even probably the last few months, is the Bsn announcement and the collaboration that we have with them to do all of that work. Yeah. So we're super excited about that. We got a lot of other interesting kind of discussions going on and partnerships coming forward as well. And we're definitely shifting along that kind of narrative I talked about early on, this shift towards more and more focus towards these layer 2 kind of scaling solutions and projects. I think we're going to see a lot of news and announcements coming around collaboration and partnerships with those types of teams as well.
Oh, wow. sign up with Grin. So you're going sort of privacy direct, so you can have a privacy aspect to CKB. It's quite
exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, if you look at any project, everyone, even Bitcoin, right? They realize that privacy is a really essential component of all of this stuff. And I think there's a lot of work still going on to explore and research what is the best way to implement that. And I think generally in the community, Mimblewimble is definitely one of those top kind of ideas, right? That people see as potentially the solution here. And of course, we're not just, you know, focusing on Mimblewimble and that's it, but that is definitely one area that we're very keen to explore and bring over to Nervos.
Oh wow, that's big news. That's interesting. The next question was actually just to answer that. Have you partnered with any other crypto projects? So just basically answered that. But have you, apart from Green, is there any ones you can tell us about, other projects that you sort of in partnership you talk with, you know, got cohesion together? Are you allowed to discuss that?
Yeah, I mean, anything that's obviously not been announced publicly, I can't really go into. But you know, when we talk about partnerships, collaborations, I mean, you can look at all of our grant teams, right? All of the teams that have come in and applied for grants and been awarded grants, they're all blockchain teams and projects in the space. So all of those guys, of course, we see as partners. We've got a lot of other guys in the ecosystem, like Oracle providers. We also see them as partners as well. There's a lot of collaboration we do with projects, especially in Asia and in China, which probably doesn't get as much visibility on the European and international side. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of stuff going behind the scenes. Perhaps we haven't been so formal in announcing and promoting these types of partnerships, but I think, you know, that will kind of evolve and scale up over time as well.
Okay, that's really interesting. What other crypto projects do you most admire?
Well, I mean, as a personal question, you know, I'm a big proponent of Bitcoin, and you know, Bitcoin for me is kind of that is the big goal there. If we see a future where, you know, Bitcoin is that kind of store of value gold, and Nervos is kind of the multi-asset platform which you use for your stable coins and all other types of digital assets, that's the kind of, you know, perfect future that I kind of see. I think there's a lot of interesting projects in the space. They're all doing kind of different things, but I don't think anyone's really achieved the kind of things that Bitcoin has. And also, you know, I mean, Nervos is very much an iteration of Bitcoin, and we very much follow the direction of Bitcoin. And I think, you know, everyone in the team very much aspires to be, you know, a very decentralized, permissionless, without compromise, and very community driven, right? So a lot of our kind of strategy is to slowly move towards being as much community driven as possible. And, you know, of course, we're following in the footsteps of Bitcoin in that respect. Yeah,
that's great. Cheers. If someone's being a relatively new project, obviously you've done really well to get into the top 100 as soon as you did on CoinMarketCap. How do you see yourselves getting in the top 50 and obviously one day getting in the top 20 and top 10? Because it's such a competitive market. We see some projects come out of nowhere, go in the top 20, and then they're sort of gradually filtered down. But you've been solid in the top 100, and because you are such a new project, you've done really well. So Peter asked, how do you see yourselves developing to continuously move forward? You've already spoken about that, obviously, many times, but how do you see yourself sustaining the top 100 on CoinMarketCap with so much competition?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. You know, short-term price, market cap, I think can, as you mentioned, can change very quickly. Yeah. I think consistency is exactly the right approach. And yeah, to consistently and over time move up is obviously, you know, is a great kind of seal of approval for the project. But how do we do that, right? So, I mean, really, it's about sticking to our strategy, driving forward and pushing forward. Yeah. I think, you know, I'm sure a lot of your viewers are aware of many projects in the top 100 which don't have a lot of development, right? Which don't really have people driving it and don't have growth, but for some reason or whatever, they have that market cap, right? Yeah. That could be because, you know, they're established at a much earlier date and these types of things. So, you know, I think these things take time. And as you said, you know, to be where we are now is quite good, but of course we want to kind of keep pushing forward. But specifically, how do we achieve that sort of stuff? So, you know, we talked a little bit about, the mainnet being just the very first part of this. And I think, a lot of where we are now comes from, having the concept of what NERVOS is and how we've designed it, right? These design principles and all these sort of things which attracted this kind of early group to the project. And I think that takes us so far, right? But I think the next stage is about really showing what NERVOS can do. So what can actually be achieved that can have real impact for the space, the industry, and the world at large. So I think really that next phase is going to come from really showing the end user what's possible with NERVOS, things that you can do on NERVOS that you can't do on any other network. And I think we're getting to that point. I think when we're at the point where you don't even have to explain the layer one of NERVOS, right, to people. All you need to do is kind of show them the end product or show them what they can do with it. That's kind of where we want to be at. And I think that should probably help us drive to that kind of next level of awareness and adoption.
Yeah, that's the first thing a lot of people look into. They see your roadmap, you see your progression, how you're developing. If you haven't got a roadmap, then people think you are basically a project that's just moving along, as you're saying, it's just there on sort of name. But because you are progressing so well, I have high hopes myself, but obviously on the outside, but I can see the development going on behind the scenes. I'm really, pumped for the future, really, to be nervous. So yeah, it's really good. Another one was, again, I always get asked these questions about basically how can people use NERVOS for everyday usage. Do you have plans to sort of integrate with perhaps crypto.com or WIREX or another debit card provider? Debit cards seem to be popular at the moment, with BINANCE announcing their debit card. Do you have any plans to sort of one day have a debit card or integrate yourself with one of those, like crypto.com?
Yeah, I think the payment use case is definitely, one of the most kind of exciting within the kind of whole sector. And I do think NERVOS is very much geared towards that direction, as part of it. I think maybe we're going to touch on this in later questions, but a lot of work is being done to allow seamless integration for payments for NERVOS. Of course, a big part of the network is about, multi-asset and different types of tokens as well. Yeah. Of course, that includes stable coins and these types of things. Coming back to the point I made about, Bitcoin and NERVOS, if you have your Bitcoin on your wallet and then you have your stable coins and your CKB with NERVOS, and you can just make instant payments, wherever you go through point-of-sale terminals. That's kind of the long-term vision for that type of thing.
That's good. Okay, that's lovely. Especially with like MasterCard now finally jumping on board. They're trying now to get involved with WIREX, and it was just Visa before. Now MasterCard have sort of woken up and wait a minute, we need to get involved with cryptocurrency. It's good to see.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and especially with the news about the US banks allowing custody of crypto assets, and I think just in the last few weeks and months, we've seen some more developments in that space. At the same time, you started to see the original challenges of some of these older networks like Ethereum, for example, when they start to get busy and overused, right? So currently transaction fees on Ethereum are extremely high. Yeah. And I think that demonstrates that really we're not, some of these kind of more legacy platforms like Ethereum, they're not really ready for the type of mass adoption, for things like proof of stake. Yeah, exactly, right? So, so I still think that there's work to be done there, and I think NERVOS is perfectly geared up to fill that niche in the market as well.
That's great. Someone said, could you explain your proof of work algo? You touched on proof of work earlier. Someone said, could you give an overview of the algo? How it will work?
Yeah, so I can talk about it a little bit. So the algorithm used on NERVOS's proof of work system is called EagleSong. It's actually an iteration on Bitcoin's consensus algorithm, which is dubbed the Nakamoto consensus. Now, there's, we could talk about this a lot, and to get like, a technical explanation, we'd have to bring on, cryptographers.
Yeah.
But one of the kind of most interesting things I think to talk about with the consensus algorithm is the way that it's designed to tackle the kind of ASIC challenge in the blockchain space. So for anyone not familiar with ASICs, they're essentially dedicated hardware that's built specifically to mine a specific consensus algorithm, right? And it's quite a controversial area because when you have specific ASICs, which are way more powerful than GPU and CPU mining, which can be used for any chain, you have that challenge of, is there a centralization of the mining of the network because of the ASIC production? Because, for example, if only a certain amount of people can buy this specific ASIC, they're the only people that can mine it, right? So the other side to that is that we've seen a lot of projects like Monero and others trying to avoid the development of ASICs to mine on these networks. And the reality of that situation is that no one's really been able to make a network that's ASIC resistant. Someone has always found a way to do that. So it's fairly inevitable that specific hardware will be developed to mine on your network. So with these kind of understandings in place, the way that EagleSong was developed for Nervos was to allow, it's a very simple consensus algorithm to essentially develop ASICs for, okay? And what that means is that because it's so easy to develop these ASIC hardware for mining on Nervos, it actually allows high competition between manufacturers, right? Because if you have a very complicated mining algorithm that takes a lot of investment, a lot of capital, a lot of time to develop the ASIC for, you may only find that one or maybe two companies actually bother to make that investment, right? But if you make it simple enough that these companies can develop an ASIC very, very quickly, they can produce it, for a relatively low cost, it means that you can have high competition in those manufacturers. And we've actually seen that has happened, and we're actually super happy with the way that that's progressed. We were actually very, very surprised that ASICs were developed so quickly for Nervos. But already, I think there's more than 3 companies that are developing them. They're very widely available. Anyway, so I just talked. There's a lot to talk about around the whole mining ecosystem. And all
I know.
But I think. Yeah, but I think that strategy of how we've somewhat accepted the inevitability of ASICs, but we've designed it in a way to address the concerns of what people have for ASICs, I think is a big credit to Nervos as well.
No, that's very good. Yeah, no, definitely. Again, it's a quite in-depth question. Please explain your inflation model, i.e. the tax short token holders tokenomic in general. That's quite in-depth. I appreciate that. So that actually question come up twice. Yeah. Surprising.
Yeah, so we already touched a little bit on that, right? And okay, if you understand Bitcoin and the token issuance on Bitcoin, then you've understood most of Nervos, right? So just like Bitcoin, there is a fixed primary issuance, okay, and that issuance is halved every 4 years. So that is the primary issuance, which is paid to the miners essentially to secure the network, okay? The difference between the Bitcoin token issuance and Nervos issuance is that Nervos has a secondary issuance, a secondary token issuance, okay? Now, the reason that we have a secondary issuance is directly to address the challenges we see on Bitcoin, where essentially the mining reward runs out. Right. So at some point in Bitcoin's future, the mining reward, the block reward is going to run out. And the only thing left to compensate miners is the fees, the transaction fees. Right. So we see that as a potential risk to the long-term sustainability of Bitcoin, because what happens when there's no mining reward, then what is the incentive for people to actually mine the network and to secure the network? Right. So, Satoshi's, when Satoshi designed this, his idea was, by that point in the future, the network will be used so much that transaction fees will be more than enough to sustain the network. Now, the challenge there is what we've seen since then is that, the challenges of scalability and throughput and TPS meant that actually Bitcoin and the Bitcoin development community have also shifted towards the same direction as Nervos, as focusing on scaling via layer 2. Yeah. Now, if you start to scale Bitcoin via layer 2, you're actually moving a lot of the transactions off the network, right? And so you can then see that challenge there that, okay, in the future, if the network has scaled, you have all these the transactions happening off chain, you're actually essentially removing all the fees off the base chain, and therefore who's incentivized to do that, right? There's other issues in there I could talk about as well, but fundamentally, because of that and a couple of other reasons, we've implemented a secondary issuance. So there will always be a consistent issuance of the network, of tokens to incentivize miners to secure the network. Now, the downside to doing that, of course, is it's kind of anti the kind of fixed hard supply of Bitcoin. So one of the real attractiveness and one of the great things about Bitcoin is you have this very hard capped finite supply, right? It's this digital gold. There's 21 million. You can never have more. And we definitely see that is a big bonus to the network. So coming back to the Nervos DAO staking that we talked about earlier in the call, if you hold tokens and you deposit into the Nervos DAO, you will never be inflated by the secondary issuance. You will always receive your proportional share of that secondary token issuance, which means you will never be diluted more than the hard cap of the primary issuance, right? Which means essentially when you buy the tokens, it is like holding a hard cap supply if you have your tokens in the Nervos DAO. So all of those things come together to achieve this potential for having this hard cap supply as long as you deposit in the Nervos DAO, while also solving the challenges of the long-term sustainability of the network through fees and block rewards.
Okay, that's right. Oh, great, cheers. Again, the big news was basically you signed up. We talked about partnerships, etc. And someone said you actually got a partnership with China Merchant Bank. They've like invested in CKB. That's obviously huge, obviously. But you've also got many others who have invested in CKB, haven't you? Obviously, that's great for your long-term potential and how you're going to develop. So, is there any other companies you can talk about invested? I've seen a lot of reports, but just seeing the China Merchant Bank was obviously incredible. You know, because that's been around for, I believe that's the late 80s, but I read somewhere. So that's a huge bank to be involved with.
Yeah, so you know, having China Merchant Bank International involved is great for the project. And you know, as you mentioned, there's many others. So I think the list you're referring to in CMBI specifically, these were all the early stage investors into Nervos. So they came in early last year and supported the project to get it to where it's at. So in terms of like announcing those types of guys, you know, those early investors are the early investors, and that doesn't change. But yeah, I mean, going forward, of course, you know, collaboration, partnerships with lots of different projects and teams across the space, of course, is a big priority for us, and we see a ton of benefit from collaborating and working with these guys. You know, I think CMBI, of course, is massive, and we hope to work very closely with them going forward. You know, exploring potential proof of concepts and DeFi and all this sort of stuff, which, you know, kind of fits very well with their background and experience. And I think, you know, the work with CMBI is similar to what we've recently announced with BSN, right? I think BSN is as big, if not bigger, than the CMBI announcement. And you know, we're hoping obviously to work super close with BSN and leverage that as well.
Okay, that's great. Someone also put, with so much competition, how are you going to resolve the instant zero fees requirements that everyone is seeking now? You know, that's a very general question. So I don't know the answer to that, but you know, if that's what everyone.
No, it's a very interesting question to ask, right? And we already touched a little bit on you know, fees and what we're seeing on Ethereum. At Nervos, we're not trying to achieve like zero fee instant transactions. In fact, our position at Nervos and generally for the space is that you can't really have zero fee and instant transaction in blockchain. In fact, what you need to think about is like, what is the value of making a totally permissionless, decentralized payment, right? And what is the value to a person for that? Now, if you look at Ethereum and Bitcoin, and when they have super high fees, then you know you can go into that. But fundamentally, a blockchain network must be secured, right? And it must be secured through incentivizing the miners or whoever's basically running the nodes on the network, right? They need to be incentivized. And I think if you look at certain projects that are trying to achieve, you know, effectively zero fees you're going to see some challenges, some compromises that they've made in terms of the decentralization of the network or other types of things. I mean, fundamentally, you can't really have a truly permissionless and decentralized network that has zero fees, because straight away you have an attack vector of spam and DDoS, right? So if you have zero fees, what's stopping, you know, a business, a competitor, a government, an individual to just spam the network with transactions and congest the whole network, right? So there's some fundamental challenges of achieving that type of things. I think the balance here, and what we see at Nervos, is that if you want to have very, very high security, permissionless, and all these sort of aspects that we see, especially which the types of things you get on Bitcoin, let's include kind of privacy on top of that as well, then probably you need to pay a certain amount, a reasonable amount, to use that fundamental layer one, right? To have that high security. If you're less concerned about that, about the finality of your transaction, you should utilize these layer two scaling solutions that sit on top of it. Okay, and maybe your viewers are familiar probably with Lightning Network, and that's kind of the strategy they have there, right? Is that, you know, if you want to have instant, super fast transactions, utilize the layer two. You're compromising a little bit there on security and finality, right? And there's a very, very small counterparty risk there. But as long as you're willing to compromise on that, then you can have these very, very low latency, you know, super cheap transactions. And that's exactly the same strategy we use at Nervos. It's layer two, which is going to allow you to have these instant, super fast, low fee transactions. And then the beauty of Nervos is that once you actually have finished doing, you know, all these sort of things, and you actually want to secure, you know, a large amount of value, you can utilize the layer one to do that, and you'll probably pay some kind of, you know, fee to have that.
Okay, that's great. Yeah. Someone says, how are you able to develop in China? You know, we all know sort of China's sort of anti-cryptocurrency, but it's very pro-blockchain. Even the president mentions blockchain, and you know the market pumps, and because everyone's desperate for China to accept cryptocurrency. But you know, the fact you're involved with sort of the bank, you know, shows that there is a lot of interest there. But are you allowed to develop in China? You sort of mainly focus outside of China in Asia? Because Asia is your main focus at the moment. Am I correct?
Yeah, you know, I mean, we have a distributed team around the world. We do have quite a significant presence in China, and there is, you know, a very exciting and growing blockchain kind of community in China. You know, it's a difficult question because it depends which direction you come from. But ultimately, Nervos is a permissionless and decentralized network. So we never say that, you know, it's in X country or focusing on X place or whatever. Because ultimately, if people in certain countries couldn't access it, then it wouldn't be fully decentralized and permissionless, right? So really, the project, the code, the applications, they should be and will be available to anyone around the world, totally permissionless, without any pre-requirements or requisites at all. Having said that, of course, you know, several of our co-founders and our backers are focused on and come from China. And there's a big development kind of community there that of course, we like to leverage on. A lot of our developers are based there. So yeah, we have a lot of focus there. I do think that, you know, China, but the rest of the world as well, is moving so quick in this space, right? I don't think any country wants to kind of miss the boat on this. And I think what we're seeing is China basically taking that lead, right? Well, what we're seeing is that they are leading the pack here. So of course, it's super important for us to be a part of that, and we want to be involved, and we are, you know, as you see with Bsn. But we also want to be involved, you know, in all the other countries and everything going on, and we just want to be part and at the forefront of the development for the industry as a whole.
No, anyone who gets involved with China has really got the head start, because I've always stated any country that embraces blockchain, you know, will be ahead of the field, and the countries who don't look at it very favourably are just going to get left behind, aren't they? I think it's great for any country to get involved. So the fact you're actually in China and got investment in China is huge, isn't it? I think that's just wonderful for the project, you know, you actually got investment in China, so it shows their interest. And obviously, once China adopts it, then well, world's the oyster, as they say, because it's just absolute mainstream adoption then. So that'd be great. someone else wants the max supply of CKB. You spoke about that earlier with the tokens issuance. So I think I looked on CoinMarket with 28 billion, isn't it? And the circulating
so the total, coming back to we talked about it, right? That primary issuance, the primary issuance, that total token supply, I'm just checking, is 33.6 billion CKB, and that's issued as just like Bitcoin is, halved every 4 years. So that's that total supply, and then the secondary issuance is 1.344 billion issued each year, right? So already, you can see that the secondary issuance, right, which is this kind of like long-term sustainable strategy to make sure we always have rewards for miners, is a very, very, very small part of the current issuance, right? I think it's maybe 5%, maybe in the first year, right? And then what you'll see is that as this primary issuance halves every 4 years, it's going to slowly decrease, and then you're going to see that primary issuance being a larger percentage component of it. So just coming back to the Nervos DAO example in the primary issuance, secondary issuance, right? If you ignored the primary issuance and you owned 1% of all CKB, and you put that 1% of CKB in the Nervos DAO, you would always own 1% of all tokens, right? If you're excluding the primary issuance part, and that's essentially how that inflation shelter of the Nervos DAO operates.
Okay, that's really good. That's really interesting information. Cheers. Someone else could explain the MUTA framework. Does that allow any company to get started with blockchain? Does that sort of embrace any company who wants to start with blockchain? Is that how it works?
I think that's a pretty accurate kind of comment to make about it. We didn't talk about, I mean, we talked a bit about partnerships, but we didn't mention HODL. So, we have a very good relationship with HODL, and we're working on them with deploying their own blockchain, HODL chain. Now, HODL chain is very similar to MUTA. In fact, it's based essentially on the same code. And yes, essentially what MUTA does, it allows basically anyone to deploy their own blockchain network. And it's a very highly customizable blockchain that they can deploy. They can specify, what kind of consensus algorithm they want in there. They could make it proof of stake. They can make it proof of authority. It's highly customizable. And really what it allows you to do is decide where you want to kind of make the focus for the chain for what it's going to be good at, and where you want to make compromises. So for example, you could make a compromise and say, hey, we want to have super high transaction throughput of this network, so we're going to have a proof of stake network or delegated proof of stake and restrict the nodes to 21, something like what EOS or similar might be doing. Now the real benefit of MUTA here is that you can directly peg your MUTA deployment, however you want to set that up, back into CKB, back into the layer 1 of Nervos, right? So you can make those compromises on your own blockchain deployment, but then you can utilize the security and finality of the Nervos base layer 1, to have that security and permissionless aspect of your network. So to answer your question simply, yes, essentially allows you to deploy your own blockchain.
Oh, brilliant. Okay. You've already touched on this. Are there plans to burn CKB? I think you sort of covered how this all issuance happens, so it's fine. Sorry, I just mentioned quickly on that. We mentioned a little bit about how the tokens which aren't being paid to people in the Nervos DAO and not being paid to miners can effectively go into this community fund. Now that community fund isn't being utilized, and all of those tokens are being burned. So there's token burn going on the network currently. Yeah. Okay. Light client protocol. Could you explain that? An overview of the light client protocol?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question, because it relates back to the instant payments and the kind of point of sale kind of discussion we had earlier, right? So essentially, the light client allows you to run a Nervos node, but essentially with a very light deployment, right? Like a small application. Now, really, the benefit of this is, so I'm sure you're very aware, with Bitcoin and other networks, you need to download the whole blockchain, right? And on some networks that can be very, very large. In fact, Ethereum is probably has the biggest issue here, right? Because they have a whole issue with not enough people running nodes because the blockchain is so big, and they have this issue that we refer to as state bloat. But anyway, we could go into that a lot. But essentially, the Light client allows people to run the NERVOS blockchain and to validate transactions and essentially be their own bank, be their own node, but without having to download and store the whole blockchain. Okay, so why do we want to do this, right? So there's a ton of benefits and a lot of reasons why we want to implement the Light client, and there's work going on this already. One of the most exciting things for me is basically being able to have this mobile wallet, right? So you can have a full node on your mobile. You know, you don't need to rely on any third party to validate transactions or build your transactions or anything like that. And so you can essentially be your own bank. You can have everything self-contained, validate all your transactions, sign all your transactions yourself, and you're going to have, you know, essentially that extra layer of privacy and all those sort of things. There's other things for the Light client as well. You know, you can have implementation and integration of that into your web browser, to your email client. There's a lot of very interesting and exciting possibilities from that, and I actually think that topic is going to be explained a bit in some of the communications coming out from the foundation around, you know, our plans, because the Light client is definitely one of the areas of focus for us over the next 6 months.
Oh, great! That's incredible. Yeah. Kenneth, why is it called NERVOS? Who come up with the name NERVOS? Obviously, it's placed on the screen there, CKB, common knowledge base, but where does NERVOS come from? Who come up with that name?
Yeah, so that was come up by the founders. You know, you get a different answer for this for who you ask, actually. So one of the answers is it's OS for of society, so nerve of society, right? Which is kind of like the fundamental concept of that. OS could also refer to open source, because of course the project is fully open source. But yeah, it's kind of the name in general is hinting at that idea of the NERVOS system, right? And how essentially it wants to be this framework for everything to kind of run off. So that's really where it came from. You know, we occasionally get a bit of flack for the name, you know, but you know, I think once you understand the meaning behind it, then yeah, it kind of makes a bit more sense.
Okay, that's fair. Someone said you can do a virtual summit soon, where people again could sort of join a virtual summit, ask the questions, see the updates. Talk about updates. I suppose we'll get them on Twitter, I assume, with the latest updates. And again, obviously on your roadmap, perhaps another white paper. I don't know. But we were doing virtual summit. Is that something you look to do? Because obviously with this coronavirus, we're going to lock down for months by the looks of it. So.
Yeah, we've been discussing this quite a lot, actually. I think, you know, we've definitely heard the feedback from the community that they want to have a bit more visibility on what's going on, and I think we definitely accept that. You know, I think there's so much going on behind the scenes. Sometimes communicating that to the public almost becomes like a secondary thing, right? Which of course it shouldn't be. We try and put out regular updates. Any big announcements come out, we're always going to put that out on Medium, and we're going to announce that. We're always going to share that stuff on Twitter, so follow our Twitter account. We're also going to post and share that on Telegram and also our Discord. The NERVOS Discord, which is open for anyone to join, is one of where the whole NERVOS Foundation kind of operates and works day to day as well. So you know, feel free to join that as well. Specifically on the event. So yeah, you know, we were hoping to have quite a big event around the 1-year anniversary. And I think in a perfect world, if we didn't have all the issues we have currently today, then we'd love to do like a big open invite conference. Now, of course, unfortunately, with travel restrictions and all these kind of issues, I think we're trying to work out how can we kind of, you know, make a stopgap in there? How can we kind of solve that in some way? So whether that's through, as you say, like an online summit, a kind of hybrid live stream, plus the kind of, you know, localized aspect for people that can join. I think that's super important. We have a few other initiatives as well going on to try and improve communication and updates with the community as well. So, I mean, we already have our monthly newsletter. So if anyone wants to get that kind of monthly update on everything that's gone on for the month, then head over to the website and sign up for the newsletter at the bottom. That's going to give you a full roundup of all the developments for the month, and it's pretty comprehensive. And we're also looking to create a bit more kind of engagement with the community through regular AMAs, when people can come in and, feel free to ask any questions they want. And we're also, and we just rolled out a kind of town hall style monthly update as well. So we're just kind of fleshing that out, but we're planning to roll that out as a public event shortly as well.
Okay, that's great. And also your YouTube channel as well is great as well for rolling out the latest projects and how you're developing. I've watched those, so they're good as well. So again, I'll put the links below for all that so people can just follow the links. That's great. Someone said, where are you based? Obviously, Asia sort of seems to be based. Do you have offices around the world? Do you have team members around the world? So where are you primarily?
Yes. So as a foundation, we are a remote working team. So we have people scattered kind of all over, really. We do have a lot of guys based out of China. We have quite a few guys based out of the US, both East and West Coast. We got a couple guys in Europe. We got some guys in Australia. I'm actually in Asia. I'm in Vietnam currently. So yeah, so we're all over. We work across different time zones. A lot of people I think are working remotely now, right? Because of everything that's happened this year. But before that, we were already a fully remote, asynchronous working team. So yeah, so we try and embody, decentralized aspects of the network with the way we operate and the way we run as well.
That's fair enough. Someone said, do you have external sites where you can mine CKB? Do you have any recommended sites you can mine CKB? Is that something you can elaborate on?
Yeah, so I mean, the mining on CKB is just done via the NERVOS client, right? So anyone, basically anyone can mine NERVOS, right? There's no permission required. Anyone can come in and do that. Having said that, we already touched a little bit about the ASIC development, right, earlier on the call. So, now it's pretty competitive to mine NERVOS, right, because of the profitability of mining it. And when the network first launched, last year, you could mine with CPUs and then GPUs, and it could be profitable, and a lot of people were doing that, right? Since the release of ASICs, it is more competitive. So if you don't have an ASIC and you just have CPU or GPU mining, you're probably going to find that's not going to be profitable for you. So if you have the right hardware and the right kind of knowledge to do this stuff, then anyone can come in and do it. You don't need to be part of a pool. You can do it fully independently, and you can do it, without any pre-requirements or any permission given to you, right? You just download the client and you run it. Having said that, of course, there's a lot of benefits to being in a mining pool, and that's of course the reason why mining pools exist, right? It allows you to get a much steadier stream of income from the investment into the hardware that you've made. And there are several mining pools that operate that are available, I believe, permissionlessly for anyone to join. So I think you might have shared me a link to the minerstats.com website. But that's a great link. There's a few other sites like that will cover several projects, and they'll tell you all the different mining pools that are operating on the network. And they'll for sure have links to those mining pools, so you can just check it out and see what you think. But yeah, I mean, anyone is welcome to come in and mine NERVOS. There's no preconditions or requirements to do that.
That's good, thanks. Basically, we've answered the next question, so you'll be pleased that's the end of all them questions. I do appreciate you didn't expect that many questions, to be honest, and I took up a lot of your time. I appreciate that.
No problem. I appreciate it. I appreciate having me on.
You've given us so much in-depth knowledge of NERVOS. I think we had like a basic overview, ones who sort of follow NERVOS, including myself, but now you've so much you've told us there, I was like, wow, I didn't know many aspects you said. So I really do appreciate your time. So thanks very much. God, I took up a lot of your time, haven't I? I was looking at the time. Jesus.
That's totally fine. We touched on several different areas, and I could probably go and talk about those for 1 hour, just specifically on those areas. So one of the challenges we see with NERVOS is it is quite a complicated project, right? You've got to have a fair amount of understanding of other projects in the space and the technology in general to really start to see the real benefits and the value and how different NERVOS is to other projects. And we understand that that's one of the biggest challenges we have, right? Is communicating that to the general community. But I would encourage anyone who is interested, first thing, read the white paper. They're linked directly from the homepage of the website. That will give you a pretty good overview into some of the kind of design choices and concepts of the NERVOS network. And then, just feel free to get involved, join our community channels, come in, say hello. Start a discussion, ask questions. People are going to be more than happy to help, and we'll be more than happy to have you.
No, really do appreciate your time. That's absolutely fantastic. Cheers for that. Thanks very much. Cheers, Ben.
Thanks so much, Richard. Thanks for having me. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers, Ben. Thanks very much.